Commander Du Hyun stared at the application floating on his holographic screen. He had read it 5 times already, but the words remained the same. A human from Earth had applied to take the Galactic Defense Force combat assessment. Not just any human. This one wanted to take the test without armor. "This has to be a joke," he muttered, running his fingers through his graying hair. In his 15 years as head of combat assessment on Station GDF-7, he had never seen anything like this. The application was simple and direct. Name: Lee Jinwoo. Origin: Earth, Sol System. Special requirements: none. Equipment requests: none. Du Hyun looked through the observation window at the testing arena below. Several alien candidates were going through their pre-assessment exercises, their combat armor gleaming under the bright lights. The armor wasn't just for protection. It was a necessity for most species to even attempt the challenges ahead. His communication panel buzzed. "Commander, the Earth candidate has arrived at the station," announced Officer Park Maidong, her voice carrying a mix of concern and curiosity. "Send him to briefing room 3, Du Hyun replied. "And Maidong, alert medical to stand by. We might need them." The commander stood up and straightened his uniform. He had seen images of humans before, but meeting one in person was different. Earth was classified as a death world for good reasons. Its high gravity, extreme temperature variations, and dangerous wildlife had shaped its inhabitants into something the galaxy considered both fascinating and frightening. When Du Hyun entered briefing room 3, he found himself looking at a surprisingly ordinary-looking young man. Lee Jinwoo stood at attention, wearing simple black training clothes. He was shorter than Du Hyun had expected, probably around 175 centimeters, with a lean but sturdy build. "Commander," Jinwoo said, bowing slightly, "thank you for accepting my application." Du Hyun noticed how smoothly the human moved despite the station's artificial gravity being set to galactic standard, 0.7 of Earth's gravity. Most visitors from high-gravity worlds needed time to adjust, but Jinwoo showed no signs of discomfort. "Please, sit down," Du Hyun gestured to a chair. "We need to discuss your unusual request." Jinwoo sat down carefully, showing awareness of his own strength. The chair was designed for various alien physiologies, but not specifically for humans. "Is there a problem with my application, Commander?" "Problem? That depends on your definition." Du Hyun pulled up the holographic display. "You've requested to take the combat assessment without any armor. That's never been done before. The tests are designed to evaluate candidates while using standard-issue GDF combat suits." Jinwoo nodded. "I understand, sir. But there's nothing in the regulations that requires armor use. I checked thoroughly before applying." Du Hyun frowned. The human was right. The regulations specified that candidates must pass the assessment trials, but didn't mandate how they should do it. The assumption that everyone would use armor was so basic that nobody had thought to make it a rule. "The trials include exposure to extreme conditions," Du Hyun explained. "Temperature variations from -40 to +60 degrees Celsius. Radiation, high-impact combat scenarios. The armor isn't just for show. Earth's temperature range is wider than that," Jinwoo replied calmly. "As for radiation, humans have natural repair mechanisms for DNA damage. And regarding impacts," he smiled slightly. "Well, that's what the assessment is for, isn't it?" Before Du Hyun could respond, his communication panel buzzed again. "Commander," Maidong's voice was tense. "The HFY delegation is demanding to speak with you. They're concerned about having a Deathworlder in the candidate pool." Du Hyun sighed. He had expected this. The HFY were a proud warrior species, and they usually dominated the combat assessments. "Tell them I'll meet them in 10 minutes. He turned back to Jinwoo. "You understand this won't be easy. Many will oppose your participation, especially without armor. The other candidates might refuse to compete alongside you. With respect, Commander." Jinwoo's voice remained steady, Their comfort isn't my concern. I'm here to take the assessment. If I fail on my own terms. If I succeed on my own terms. A notification popped up on the holographic display. The station's sensors had completed their scan of Jinwoo. Du Hyun's eyes widened as he read the results. The human's bone density was off the charts by galactic standards. His muscle fiber structure showed characteristics that would be considered mutations in most species. Even at rest, his reaction times were faster than many beings achieved with neural enhancement implants. Your species evolved on a world that should have killed you, Du Hyun said quietly. Instead, it made you stronger. Jinwoo's expression remained neutral, but his eyes showed a glimmer of pride. That's why I don't need armor, Commander. Humans don't just survive on Earth. We thrive there. Everything that makes Earth a death world to others made us what we are. The commander stood up and walked to the observation window. Below, a maintenance crew was preparing the arena for tomorrow's trials. The massive environmental chambers could simulate almost any planetary condition in the galaxy. They had never been tested with an unarmored participant. You know what they call humans in the galactic community? Du Hyun asked, still looking out the window. We've heard the terms, Jinwoo replied. Deathworlders. Survivalists. Some less polite ones too. Do Hyun turned back to face him. They're afraid of you. Not just because you're strong or fast, but because you represent something they don't understand. A species that evolved without depending on technology for basic survival. Being afraid of differences is natural, Jinwoo said. Overcoming that fear is what makes civilization possible. That's partly why I'm here, Commander. To show that humans can be part of the galactic community without changing what we are. A commotion outside the briefing room interrupted their conversation. Through the transparent wall, Du Hyun could see a group of HFY warriors approaching, their ceremonial armor clicking with each step. Their lead representative, a tall figure with iridescent scales, looked ready for a fight. Your first test might come sooner than expected, Du Hyun said, nodding toward the approaching group. Are you ready for this? Jinwoo stood up, his movements fluid and controlled. Commander, I've been ready since I left Earth. The question is the Galactic Defense Force ready for humans? Do Hyun touched his communication panel. My young, please inform the HFY delegation that I'll meet them in the main conference room. And, he paused, looking at Jinwoo, update the candidate roster. Mark Lee Jinwoo is approved for tomorrow's assessment. The human's slight bow couldn't hide his satisfied smile. Thank you, Commander. Don't thank me yet, Du Hyun warned. The hard part hasn't begun. The assessment has a 60% failure rate even with armor. Without it, he left the sentence unfinished. Then I'll be part of an interesting statistic either way, Jinwoo replied, heading for the door. He stopped and turned back. Commander, would you like to know why I really chose to take the assessment without armor? Do Hyun nodded, curious. Because wearing armor would mean accepting that humans need the same protection as other species. We don't. Earth didn't give us any armor. It gave us something better. It gave us the ability to adapt. Tomorrow, I'm not just taking a combat assessment. I'm showing the galaxy what that means. As Jinwoo left the briefing room, Du Hyun found himself wondering if he had just approved the most significant combat assessment in the station's history, or if he had just signed off on a spectacular disaster. Either way, tomorrow would be interesting. He gathered his documents and headed for the conference room, where angry HFY warriors awaited him. In his mind, he was already drafting the incident report he might have to write. But something told him that Lee Jinwoo wasn't going to give him any reason to use it. The station's artificial day cycle began to dim, simulating evening. In his temporary quarters, Jinwoo sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed in meditation. The other candidates were probably checking their armor systems one last time, running diagnostics, and preparing for tomorrow's trials. Jinwoo simply breathed, feeling the slightly lower gravity in his bones, listening to the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. Tomorrow, he would show them what a human could do. Tomorrow, he would remind the galaxy that sometimes the most powerful armor isn't something you wear, it's something you are. In his office, Commander Du-hyun made one final entry in the day's log. Assessment candidate Lee Jin-woo approved for non-standard evaluation protocol. Note: first human participant. First candidate to attempt assessment without armor. May God help us all. He paused, then added one more line. Personal note: for the first time in 15 years, I'm actually excited to see tomorrow's assessment. End log. The morning of the combat assessment arrived with the artificial dawn of Station GDF-7. Assessment Officer Kim Hae-ri stood in the equipment room, surrounded by racks of combat armor in various sizes and configurations. She checked her datapad one more time, frowning at the special note attached to candidate Lee Jin-woo's file. No armor requested, she read aloud, still having trouble believing it. As a third-generation space-born Korean, Hae-ri had grown up hearing stories about Earth and its inhabitants. But this was her first time dealing with a human directly. The equipment room's door slid open, and Jin-woo walked in. He wore the same simple black training clothes from yesterday, though now they had the official GDF candidate markings on them. "Good morning, Officer Kim," he said, bowing politely. Hae-ri returned the bow automatically. "Good morning, Candidate Lee. I need to verify your equipment choices before the assessment begins." She gestured to the armor racks. "We have suits calibrated for various gravity ranges. Given your Earth origin, I would recommend the Heavy World Series." Jin-woo smiled but shook his head. "No armor needed, thank you. I must inform you that while this is not technically against regulations, it is highly unusual." Hae-ri pulled up a holographic display showing the day's planned trials. The first phase alone includes exposure to extreme temperatures and varying gravity conditions. Even minimal protection will. "Officer Kim," Jin-woo interrupted gently, "I appreciate your concern. But I grew up in Seoul. I've experienced temperatures from -20 to +40 degrees Celsius just walking to school. As for gravity," he jumped slightly, rising higher than should have been possible in the station's artificial gravity. "I think I'll manage." Before Hae-ri could respond, the equipment room's door opened again. A group of alien candidates entered, led by the Hazak warrior she recognized as Kextal. All of them were already wearing their basic armor units, with only their heads exposed. Kextal's scales shifted color when he saw Jin-woo, turning from their normal blue to an aggressive orange. "So the rumors are true," he said, his translator making his voice sound artificially smooth. "They're letting a Deathworlder compete." "The assessment is open to all qualified candidates," Hae-ri stated firmly, stepping between them. "Candidate Lee has met all requirements." "Requirements?" Kextal laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Look at him. No armor. No protection. This is not a qualification test. It's a suicide attempt." Jin-woo turned to face the Hazak warrior. Despite being shorter by almost half a meter, he showed no sign of intimidation. "Where I come from, we have a saying. The best armor is the one you carry in your bones." The other aliens muttered among themselves. One of them, a tall, willowy being with crystalline skin, stepped forward. "You organics are all the same. So proud of your evolutionary advantages. But evolution is chaos. Technology is perfection." "Is it?" Jin-woo asked quietly. "Then why does every piece of armor in this room try to replicate what evolution gave humans for free? Enhanced strength, rapid healing, temperature regulation, radiation resistance. These aren't advantages we added. They're what we are." Hae-ri checked the time on her datapad. "All candidates, please proceed to the assessment chamber. The trials begin in 20 minutes." The aliens filed out, their armor whirring and clicking. Kextal remained behind for a moment, looming over Jin-woo. "We will see how well your evolution serves you when the gravity hits 5 times galactic standard, or when the temperature drops below freezing." "Yes," Jin-woo agreed calmly. We will. After they left, Hairi found herself alone with Jinwoo again. You know they're going to target you specifically in the combat trials, right? The Hazak especially. They take pride in being the galaxy's premier warriors. Officer Kim, Jinwoo said, checking the fit of his training clothes. Do you know why Earth is classified as a death world? She nodded. High gravity, extreme weather, dangerous wildlife, tectonic instability. Those are the scientific reasons, he interrupted. But there's another reason, one that isn't in the official records. Earth is a death world because it taught its children to never back down. The gravity made us strong, yes. The weather made us adaptable, true. But the real lesson Earth taught us was this: everything that tries to kill you makes you better at surviving. The station's announcement system chimed. All assessment candidates report to Chamber 1. Trials begin in 15 minutes. Hairi gathered her equipment. As the assessment officer, she would be monitoring the trials from the control room. Then I wish you luck, Candidate Lee. You're going to need it. Luck. Jinwoo smiled as they walked toward the assessment chamber. Another Earth lesson. Luck favors the prepared. And I've had about 4 billion years of evolutionary preparation. The assessment chamber was a massive space, easily 100 meters across and twice as high. Various obstacles and terrain features could be generated as needed, and the entire environment could be controlled down to the smallest detail. Currently, it was set up as a neutral space with a simple flat floor. Commander Do-hyun's voice came over the speakers. Candidates, take your positions. First trial begins in 5 minutes. Initial assessment. Environmental adaptation series. The candidates spread out across the chamber floor. Jinwoo noticed how the others kept their distance from him, creating a noticeable gap. Their armor systems were running full diagnostics, lights blinking across their surfaces as they prepared for the trials ahead. In the control room, Do-hyun and Hairi watched the preparations. How did he seem during equipment check? The commander asked. Confident, Hairi replied. Almost too confident. Sir, are we sure about this? The environmental trials are designed to test armor systems, not bare biology. Do-hyun pointed to one of the monitoring screens, which showed Jinwoo's vital signs. Look at his baseline readings: resting heart rate, blood pressure, muscle tension. He's not just acting confident, he's genuinely relaxed. 3 minutes to trial start, the system announced. On the chamber floor, Jinwoo closed his eyes for a moment, taking deep breaths. He could feel the subtle vibrations through his feet as the chamber's systems powered up. Around him, the other candidate's armor hummed as it switched to active mode. Kextal's voice carried across the chamber. Last chance, human. Request armor now, or what happens next is your own fault. Jinwoo opened his eyes but didn't turn around. You know what's interesting about Hazak armor? He asked loudly enough for everyone to hear. It's designed to compensate for your species' natural weaknesses. Poor temperature regulation, brittle bone structure, slow tissue regeneration, all corrected by technology. The Hazak warrior's scales flashed bright orange. How dare you? But humans, Jinwoo continued as if he hadn't heard. We don't wear armor to fix our weaknesses. We don't have any that need fixing. We wear it as a courtesy to others, to seem less threatening. Today, I'm done being courteous. 1 minute to trial start. All candidates prepare for gravity variation sequence. Hairi watched the tension build on the chamber floor. Sir, maybe we should separate them before. No, Do-hyun interrupted. Let them be. This isn't just about passing the trials anymore. This is about proving something. He adjusted some controls. And I want to see what exactly gets proven today. 30 seconds. Environmental seals engaging. Jinwoo took one last look around the chamber. The other candidates had spread out in a rough circle, all of them now fully sealed in their armor except for Kextal, who was still glaring at him. The Hazak warrior's scales had shifted to a deep red, a color Jinwoo's briefing documents had identified as indicating either rage or fear. 10 seconds. 9. 8. Jinwoo smiled. Earth had indeed taught its children never to back down. But it had taught them something else too. The best way to win a fight is to be so well prepared that your opponent defeats themselves. 3. 2. 1. Environmental trial beginning. Current gravity. Standard. Temperature. Nominal. Prepare for variation sequence. As the chamber's lights dimmed slightly, Jinwoo rolled his shoulders and whispered to himself, "Let's show them what a Deathworlder can do." The first trial was about to begin, and history was about to be made. One way or another, the assessment chamber's gravity shifted without warning. What had been standard gravity suddenly became 3 times stronger. The change was immediate and brutal. Several candidates stumbled, their armor systems struggling to adjust. The crystalline being's legs cracked audibly as they fought to remain standing. Only 2 figures seemed unaffected. Kextal in his advanced Hazak armor, and Jinwoo, who hadn't moved at all. "Gravity at 3 times standard," announced the chamber's computer, beginning temperature variation sequence. In the control room, Commander Do-hyun leaned forward, studying the monitors. "Officer Kim, what are his vital signs showing?" Hairi checked her readings. Elevated heart rate and increased muscle tension, but within expected parameters for his species. He's adapting naturally to the gravity increase. Down in the chamber, the temperature began to drop. The walls frosted over as the environmental systems brought the temperature down to -30 degrees Celsius. The candidates' armor systems activated their thermal regulation units, creating visible heat halos around each person. Everyone except Jinwoo, who simply breathed out slowly, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "How is he doing this?" one of the alien candidates asked, their voice distorted by their armor's communication system. "His skin should be freezing." "Thermal regulation is a basic human function," Jinwoo explained calmly, walking forward despite the heavy gravity. "On Earth, we can experience temperature swings of 40 degrees in a single day. Our bodies learned to adapt long ago." The chamber computer spoke again, beginning atmospheric pressure variation, reducing to 60% of standard. This time, several candidates' armor systems flashed warning lights. The reduced air pressure combined with the cold and heavy gravity created a brutal combination. 2 candidates fell to their knees, their armor working overtime to compensate. Jinwoo felt the pressure change in his ears and adjusted his breathing accordingly. He remembered his training at high altitudes back on Earth. This was uncomfortable, but far from impossible. "Candidate vital signs check," commanded Do-hyun through the speaker system. "Report status." One by one, the armored candidates reported their conditions. Most were stable but struggling. The crystalline being had withdrawn from the trial, their environmental suit unable to handle the combined stresses. When it was Jinwoo's turn, he simply said, "Functioning within normal parameters, Commander." Hairi's voice came through next. "Beginning mobility assessment. Targets will appear throughout the chamber. Remove them by any means necessary while environmental conditions continue to vary." Holographic targets materialized across the chamber, floating at different heights. Under the heavy gravity, reaching the higher ones would be a significant challenge. The remaining candidates began moving toward the nearest targets, their armor systems strained against the gravity, servos whining with each step. Kextal activated his suit's jump enhancers, launching himself toward a high target. Jinwoo watched for a moment, analyzing the pattern. Then he began to move. In the control room, Do-hyun and Hairi stared at their screens in disbelief. "Sir," Hairi said, "are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it," Do-hyun replied quietly. "I'm not sure I'm believing it." Jinwoo was moving through the chamber as if the increased gravity barely affected him. His jumps, while not as high as the armor-assisted candidates, were precise and efficient. He hit target after target, his movements fluid and economical. Temperature decreasing to -40 degrees Celsius, announced the computer, gravity increasing to 4 times standard. Several more candidates withdrew as their armor systems began to fail under the combined stresses. But Jin Woo continued moving, his breath frosting in the air, his movements slowing but never stopping. Kextal, one of the few remaining competitors, turned to watch the human. "Impossible," he growled through his armor speakers. "You should be crushed under this gravity." "Earth's gravity is only one factor," Jin Woo explained between targets. "Our muscles evolved to handle far more stress than just standing still. Running, jumping, fighting. Everything we do requires overcoming gravity's pull." A new set of targets appeared, these ones moving erratically. The chamber's floor began to shift, creating uneven terrain. Ice formed on every surface as the temperature continued to drop. In the control room, Hyri noticed something on her monitors. "Sir, look at his surface temperature readings." Du Hyun examined the data. "His body is generating enough heat to prevent freezing, even in this cold. How is his energy efficiency this high?" "Evolution is a remarkable engineer," Hyri murmured, remembering Jin Woo's words from earlier. Back in the chamber, only 3 candidates remained: Jin Woo, Kextal, and one other whose armor was showing signs of severe strain. The gravity increased again, now at 5 times standard. The third candidate's armor finally gave out, servos burning out with a sharp smell of ozone. They activated their emergency withdrawal signal and disappeared from the chamber. Now it was just the HFY warrior and the human. "Gravity at 5 times standard," the computer announced. "Temperature at -40 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric pressure at 60%. Final target sequence initiating." Kextal's advanced armor was holding steady, its power systems glowing as they worked to keep him mobile. "Still think evolution is superior to technology, Deathworlder," he called out. Jin Woo had slowed considerably, but his movements remained controlled. "Technology can fail," he replied, his voice slightly strained but clear. "Evolution is tested every second of every day. Everything that survives is proven to work." The final targets appeared, positioned at the highest points of the chamber. Reaching them would require extraordinary effort, even with mechanical assistance. Kextal activated his armor's maximum power setting. The suit's joints glowed as it prepared to jump. But in the extreme cold, under the crushing gravity, something went wrong. There was a sharp cracking sound, and one of the armor's leg joints froze in place. "No," Kextal shouted, trying to force the joint to move. "System restart. Emergency power." Jin Woo watched for a moment, then spoke quietly. "Your armor is impressive, but it has limits. A machine can only do what it's designed to do. A living thing." He crouched slightly, muscles tensing. "A living thing can always adapt." With that, he jumped. The control room fell silent as they watched. Under 5 times normal gravity, in freezing temperatures and thin air, a human body should not have been able to move like that. But Jin Woo's leap carried him up toward the highest target, his movement a perfect arc through the frigid air. His hand struck the target at the apex of his jump, and for a moment, he seemed to hang there, defying the crushing gravity. Then he landed, absorbing the impact with bent knees, leaving slight cracks in the icy floor beneath his feet. "Final target sequence completed," announced the computer. "Environmental trial concluding. Returning conditions to standard." As the gravity slowly decreased and the temperature began to rise, Jin Woo walked over to where Kextal stood trapped in his malfunctioning armor. "Do you need assistance?" he asked the HFY warrior. Kextal's scales had shifted to a deep blue, a color indicating shock or disbelief. "How?" he asked simply. "How did you do this?" Jin Woo smiled. "I didn't do anything special. I just did what humans have always done. I adapted to my environment instead of trying to force the environment to adapt to me." The chamber returned to normal conditions. Medical teams entered to check on the candidates who had withdrawn. Technicians approached Kextall to help with his frozen armor. In the control room, Commander Do-hyun made notes in his assessment log while Hai-ri compiled the performance data. "Sir," she said after a moment, "according to our metrics, this was the highest score ever recorded in an environmental trial." "And he did it without any assistance," Do-hyun added. "Officer Kim, I believe we're going to need to revise our understanding of human capabilities. And our assessment protocols," she agreed. "Should we proceed with the combat trials as planned?" Do-hyun watched as Jin-woo helped the technicians with Kextall's armor, showing no signs of fatigue from the ordeal he had just endured. "Yes," he decided, "but send a notice to all remaining candidates. They should know what they're facing now. This isn't just about testing a human anymore. This is about learning from one." As Jin-woo left the chamber, various aliens moved aside to let him pass. Their expressions ranged from fear to awe to thoughtful consideration. He had shown them something they had never seen before, that sometimes the most advanced technology was no match for 4 billion years of evolutionary refinement. The combat trials would begin soon, and now everyone knew. The unarmored human wasn't just participating in the assessment. He was redefining it. After a 2-hour break for rest and medical checks, the candidates gathered for the combat trials. The assessment chamber had been reconfigured, now filled with various obstacles and terrain features. Holographic markers divided the space into combat zones. Commander Do-hyun's voice echoed through the chamber. "Combat assessment will proceed in 3 phases. Phase 1, individual combat against training drones. Phase 2, tactical movement and target elimination. Phase 3, direct combat between candidates." Jin-woo stood at his designated starting position, stretching his muscles. The environmental trials had been demanding, but his body had already recovered. Around him, the remaining candidates were having their armor systems checked and recalibrated. "First phase beginning," announced Officer Kim Hai-ri. "Training drones activated. Difficulty level, advanced." Combat drones rose from compartments in the chamber floor. They were spherical machines about 1 meter in diameter, equipped with stunning weapons and basic combat intelligence. Their outer shells were designed to withstand significant impact. "Remember," Do-hyun added, "the drones are programmed to match your threat level. They will escalate their response based on your performance." The drones spread out through the chamber. Each candidate would face 3 of them simultaneously. Jin-woo watched as the machines assigned to him took position, their sensors glowing as they analyzed him. In the control room, Hai-ri monitored the drone settings. "Sir, the drones are having trouble categorizing the human. Without armor, their threat assessment protocols are confused." "Let them adapt," Do-hyun replied. "That's what they're designed to do." The combat phase began. Throughout the chamber, candidates engaged their drones, armor systems powering up to meet the challenge. Energy weapons fired. Stunning beams crisscrossed the air, and the sound of metal striking metal echoed off the walls. Jin-woo's drones attacked in a coordinated pattern, trying to surround him. Their first shots were conservative, testing his reactions. He moved with precise efficiency, each step calculated to require minimal energy while achieving maximum effect. "Look at his movement pattern," Hai-ri said, pointing to her screen. "He's using the drone's programming against them. They're designed to predict paths based on standard combat armor capabilities." Jin-woo ducked under a stunning beam, his reaction time far exceeding the drone's predictions. In one fluid motion, he grabbed a piece of debris from the chamber floor and threw it with extraordinary force. The projectile struck one drone's sensor array, disrupting its targeting systems. "Impossible," one of the technicians muttered. "The force required to damage drone armor." "Not impossible," Do-hyun corrected. "Just human." The damaged drone tried to compensate, but Jin-woo was already moving. He jumped, using the drone's altered flight path to springboard himself toward the second machine. His hands found grip points that shouldn't have existed, and with a twist of his body, he redirected the drone into its companion. The impact disabled both machines. Around the chamber, other candidates were still struggling with their drones, their armor systems providing protection but also limiting their mobility. Kextal, his armor repaired, was engaging his drones with aggressive efficiency, but even his advanced suit couldn't match Jin Wu's natural speed. Second wave initiated, the computer announced. 5 more drones approached Jin Wu, these ones moving faster and more erratically. They're learning, Jin Wu murmured to himself. Good. This time, he didn't wait for them to attack. He charged forward, moving in ways that defied the drone's combat algorithms. Where they expected him to seek cover, he advanced. When they predicted he would retreat, he attacked. His combat style, Hyri observed, it's completely adaptable. No fixed patterns. Because he's not limited by armor protocols, Du Hyun explained. Every other candidate has to work within their suit's capabilities. He only has to work within his own. The second wave of drones fell one by one. Jin Wu used their own momentum against them, turning their coordinated attacks into opportunities. When one drone fired, he would move so its beam struck another. When they tried to surround him, he would trigger their collision avoidance protocols, making them crash into each other. Final wave approaching, the computer announced. Maximum difficulty engage. 7 drones surrounded Jin Wu, these ones larger and more heavily armored, their weapons powered up with an ominous hum. In the control room, warning indicators flashed. Sir, Hyri said with concern, these drones are set beyond safety protocols. Their stunning weapons could cause actual harm. Can you override them? Negative. They've adapted to threat level Omega. They're treating him as a maximum level threat. Down in the chamber, Jin Wu smiled. Finally, he said quietly, a real challenge. The drones attacked simultaneously, their weapons firing in a pattern designed to leave no escape route. But they had made one crucial mistake. They were still operating on assumptions about how a living being should move and react. Jin Wu dropped and rolled, his body moving in ways the drone's combat computers couldn't predict. He came up inside their formation, where their weapons couldn't fire without risking friendly fire protocols. Outstanding, Du Hyun breathed. He's using their safety programming against them. One drone adjusted quickly, trying to ram Jin Wu. He caught it with both hands, muscles straining as he absorbed its momentum. Then, in a display of raw strength that made every observer gasp, he spun and threw the drone into 2 of its companions. The remaining drones switched tactics, attempting to trap him with electromagnetic fields. But Jin Wu was already moving again. He ran straight up a wall, pushed off, and descended into the middle of the drone formation like a predator among prey. How is he calculating these moves? One of the technicians asked in awe. He's not calculating, Du Hyun replied. This is instinct refined by evolution. His ancestors had to move like this to survive. The last drone fell, its systems disabled by a precisely aimed piece of debris. Jin Wu stood alone in his section of the chamber, breathing steadily, unmarked by the intense combat. Around him, other candidates were still finishing their battles. Some had already withdrawn, their armor damaged or their energy depleted. Kextal was the only other one who had completed the trial, but his armor showed signs of heavy wear. Individual combat phase complete, announced the computer. Proceeding to tactical movement assessment. The chamber's configuration changed again. Holographic targets appeared throughout the space, while various environmental hazards activated. Pools of simulated acid, electrical barriers, and unstable terrain filled the arena. Candidates will navigate the course and eliminate targets, Hyri explained. Time and accuracy will be measured. Jin Wu studied the course. Where others saw obstacles, he saw opportunities. The unstable terrain that would challenge armored movement would provide him with natural launching points. The hazards that would strain shield systems would simply need to be avoided. Beginning in 3, 2, 1. The candidates moved out. Those in armor activated their enhancement systems, trying to maintain speed while managing their power reserves. Jin Woo simply ran, his movements flowing like water around obstacles. Look at his efficiency rating. Hairi pointed to her display. He's using less energy than anyone else, but maintaining higher speed. Because he's not fighting against his own protection systems. Du Gyun noted. Every other candidate has to power through these obstacles. He just adapts to them. Jin Woo cleared the course in record time, his accuracy with targets perfect. As he reached the finish point, he wasn't even breathing hard. Combat assessment phase 2 complete, the computer announced. Prepare for candidate versus candidate trials. The remaining candidates gathered in the chamber center. Only 4 had made it this far. Jin Woo, Kextal, and 2 others whose armor showed signs of heavy stress. Final phase will be one-on-one combat, Du Hyun announced. Victory by submission or system disability. First match, Lee Jin Woo versus Kextal. The Huzak warrior stepped forward, his armor humming with restored power. No more drones, he said through his speakers. No more obstacles. Just you and me, Deathworlder. Jin Woo nodded respectfully. You're wrong about one thing, he replied. It's never just 2 opponents. It's also gravity, momentum, energy, and time. The question is, which of us understands these allies better? The final phase was about to begin, and everyone watching knew they were about to witness something unprecedented in the history of the Galactic Defense Force. The assessment chamber fell silent as Jin Woo and Kextal took their positions. The Huzak warrior's armor gleamed under the lights, its power systems fully charged for this final confrontation. Jin Woo stood calmly in his simple training clothes, looking almost relaxed despite the challenge ahead. Commander Du Hyun's voice came through the speakers. Final combat assessment. Victory conditions. Opponent submission or combat inability. Begin when ready. In the control room, Officer Kim Hairi monitored both competitors' vital signs. Sir, Kextal's armor is operating at maximum capacity. All systems enhanced. And Jin Woo? Du Hyun asked. Steady heart rate, optimal blood oxygen levels. He's not even showing signs of stress. Kextal made the first move. His armor's enhanced systems launched him forward at incredible speed, the floor cracking under the force of his departure. The attack was perfectly executed, designed to end the fight in seconds. But Jin Woo wasn't there anymore. The human had moved with such natural speed that several observers didn't even see it happen. One moment he was in Kextal's path, the next he had shifted just enough for the Huzak warrior to pass by him. Impossible. Kextal growled, his armor adjusting to compensate for the missed attack. The reaction time required is exactly what Earth gave us. Jin Woo completed the thought. When your ancestors were developing technology, mine were dodging predators that could move faster than your armor can. Kextal's next attack was more controlled. His armor's combat systems analyzed Jin Woo's movement patterns, trying to predict where the human would dodge. Energy fields activated around his limbs, creating deadly zones of force. Jin Woo watched the energy fields with interest. Impressive technology, he said, but there's something your armor's combat computer doesn't understand. Humans don't move by calculation. We move by instinct. The fight that followed left everyone in the observation room speechless. Kextal's armor gave him strength that could shatter walls, speed that broke the sound barrier, and defensive fields that could stop projectiles. But he couldn't land a single solid hit on the human. Look at his movement pattern, Hairi said, pointing to her display. There isn't one. Every motion is unique, adapted to the exact moment. Jin Woo flowed around Kextal's attacks like water around rocks. Where the Huzak warrior's movements were powerful but predictable, limited by his armor's programming, Jin Woo's were completely natural and impossible to predict. Your armor is fighting itself, Jin Woo explained as he dodged another attack. Every time you move, it has to adjust countless systems. Power distribution, balance compensation, environmental controls. But my body, he demonstrated by executing a perfect flip over Kextal's head. It just moves. Frustration began to show in Kextal's attacks. His armor's power consumption increased as he pushed it harder, trying to match the human's natural abilities. Warning lights began to flash across his suit's surface. "Sir," Hyrie reported, "Kextal's armor is approaching critical power levels. The strain of maintaining maximum output." She didn't need to finish. Everyone could see what was happening. The more Kextal tried to match Jinwu's capabilities, the more his technology struggled to keep up. "This is the difference between evolution and engineering," Jinwu said, still moving effortlessly. "Your armor can do amazing things, but it needs power to do them. My abilities." He demonstrated with another lightning-fast dodge. "They're always available, always working, and they never run out of energy as long as I'm alive." Kextal's armor emitted a warning tone. "Power reserves critical," announced its automated system. "Performance degrading." "Now you have a choice," Jinwu said, stopping his movement. "You can keep pushing your armor until it fails completely, or you can acknowledge that sometimes the best technology is the one that took billions of years to develop." The HFY warrior stood still, his armor systems whirring as they tried to cool down. His scales, visible through his helmet, had shifted to a color that indicated deep thought. "How?" he asked finally. "How can you be this effective without protection?" Jinwu smiled. "Because I don't need protection from an environment that made me what I am. Earth didn't give us armor. It gave us something better. It gave us the ability to become whatever we needed to be." In the control room, Du Hyun made a decision. "Combat assessment completed," he announced. "Victory awarded to candidate Li Jinwu by technical superiority." As the announcement echoed through the chamber, Kextal did something unexpected. He initiated his armor's removal sequence. Piece by piece, the advanced technology detached from his body, until he stood in his basic clothing. "I understand now," the HFY warrior said. "We believed we had surpassed evolution with our technology, but you have shown us that we were wrong. True strength isn't in what we add to ourselves, it's in what we already are." Jinwu bowed respectfully. "Every species finds its own path. Technology isn't wrong, it's just different. Today wasn't about proving one better than the other. It was about understanding each other." The assessment chamber began powering down as medical teams and technicians entered. But instead of rushing to the candidates, they moved slowly, almost cautiously around Jinwu. The human's display had changed how they saw him, and by extension, how they saw all humans. In the control room, Hyrie finished her final data entry. "Sir, what category do we put this under?" "There's no precedent for a candidate completing the assessment without armor." Du Hyun thought for a moment. "Create a new category," he decided. "Natural capability assessment, and mark it as the benchmark for future testing." "You think there will be more humans attempting this?" "I think," Du Hyun said, watching as Jinwu helped Kextal gather his discarded armor, "that we've just seen the beginning of what humans can show us. They've been holding back, trying to fit into our standards. Maybe it's time we adjusted our standards to account for them." Later that day, as Jinwu prepared to leave the station, Commander Du Hyun met him in the departure area. "The Galactic Defense Force has never seen anything like your performance today," the commander said. "You've changed how we think about combat capability." Jinwu nodded. "That was part of the goal. Humans have been adapting to other standards for too long. It was time to show that our natural abilities aren't a disadvantage. They're an asset." "The assessment board is already discussing new protocols," Du Hyun continued. "Future human candidates will have the option to attempt the trials without armor. Though I doubt many will match your performance. They might surprise you." Jinwu smiled. "That's another thing about humans. We tend to exceed expectations." As Jinwu boarded his transport back to Earth, the station's crew watched through the observation windows. Among them stood Kextal, still without his armor, his scales now showing a color that indicated deep respect. "He showed us something important today," the HFY warrior said to those around him. The greatest strength isn't in what we can add to ourselves. It's in understanding what we already are. Commander Du-hyun made his final entry in the assessment log. Candidate Lee Jinwoo has completed all trials without the use of standard combat armor. Performance exceeded all existing metrics. Recommendation: immediate acceptance into Galactic Defense Force with special commendation. Additional note: begin review of all combat assessment protocols to include evaluation of natural capabilities alongside technological enhancement. Final observation: today we were reminded that the most advanced technology in the galaxy might not be something we build. It might be something that evolved on a planet we once dismissed as too dangerous for life. End log. The story of the unarmored human who redefined combat assessment spread quickly through the galactic community. It sparked debates about the relationship between natural evolution and technological advancement, and it opened new discussions about what it truly meant to be advanced. But perhaps most importantly, it reminded everyone that sometimes the most remarkable capabilities aren't found in what we add to ourselves, but in what we already are. Earth had created something extraordinary in its human inhabitants, not by giving them protection from danger, but by teaching them to become stronger than the dangers they faced. The age of assuming technological superiority was over. The age of understanding and respecting natural capability had begun. And it had started with one human who chose to show the galaxy exactly what a Deathworlder could do.